Yesterday, Reeva Steenkamp's cousin Kim Martin concluded her testimony at the North Gauteng High Court in Pretoria. This was her second day of testimony and was followed by the Acting National Commissioner for Correctional Services, Modise. Oscar Pistorius was found guilty of culpable homicide for shooting his girlfriend Reeva Steenkamp on the 14th of February 2013 at his Pretoria home. We cross now to Chriselda, who is at the North Gauteng High Court in Pretoria. Morning to you again, Chriselda. Let's talk about the final testimony of Kim Martin and what was said yesterday, saying, I think what really stood out was the fact that she just did not feel that the apology to the family was genuine at the beginning of Oscar Pistorius' testimony.
Well, certainly, Leanne, you know, when Kim Martin took the stand, we knew that it was going to be a very emotional testimony. You would recall that SABC News had conducted an exclusive interview with Kim Martin several weeks ago, if not a month or two ago. And in it, you know, she gave a very brief a description of what the Steenkamp family was going through as a result of Reeva Steenkamp's killing. But she went very in-depth inside this court to paint a picture of a family that was broken, a family that has struggled since the very beginning, a family that relied on Reeva Steenkamp for financial support, and painted a picture of a girl who loved her family, and a family that loved her back. So certainly, you know, that emotional testimony from Kim Martin is something that the state will really rely on today in closing arguments to tell this court that that testimony was enough to prove that Oscar Pistorius has done significant damage to a family by shooting and killing Reeva Steenkamp. They'll also focus on the fact that, according to them, Oscar Pistorius is not remorseful for what he has done, and that Oscar Pistorius should spend some time in jail.
Yeah. All right. So that was the family's point of view. And then the final witness for the state, of course, was Commissioner Modise, talking about the conditions inside South African jails, particularly pertaining to people with disabilities. Do you think he did enough to convince the court, you know, just in terms of the South African prisons, and particularly the prison that he may be sent to, they will look after him. He will be treated in a way that disabled people should be treated?
It's quite a very strong response from the state, Leanne, in that, of course, you'll remember Annette Vergeer's testimony where she basically said that South African correctional facilities are not adequate to deal with people with disabilities, in this case Oscar Pistorius. So bringing in Modise was to discredit the testimonies of all three of those defense witnesses who said that basically Oscar Pistorius would not be able to cope in jail, that Oscar Pistorius should instead basically be placed under house arrest, and that he should do community service, having been found guilty of culpable homicide. So bringing in Modise basically was to say that South African, the prison system is adequate. The facilities are there. We heard Modise speak about gyms inside prison. We heard him speak about a hospital unit that would be able to cater to Oscar Pistorius' needs. So certainly a last-minute ditch by the state there to try and, of course, argue that South Africa's prison system is adequate. There's enough facilities, certainly that it's not a holiday, of course, but the facilities that are needed for Oscar Pistorius do exist within the correctional system. So I really think, you know, bringing in Modise, of course, that brought in at the last minute. He was not on the initial list of the witnesses that were expected to testify in aggravation of sentence, but of course he was brought in after the testimony of Annette Vergeer, who basically said that Oscar Pistorius should not go to jail because it's too dangerous for him.
Yeah. All right. Let's now talk about what happened outside of the courtroom. Oh, well, it happened inside as well. We've got now there's Mickey Schultz, who's at the courtroom. a self-confessed killer. We've got Mark Batchelor, who was there. We have Amy Pistorius, Oscar's sister, bursting into tears, saying that there was a threat against her. And then, of course, we heard Mickey saying, no, I did not threaten anybody. Who do the Pistorius family think they are? Yeah, is this necessary? Is this something we really need right now, almost at the final day of court?
Well, certainly not, Leanne, but of course it did create quite a lot of drama, both inside and outside the court, with journalists really trying to find out exactly what happened. Of course, the Pistorius is saying that a threat was made against Amy Pistorius. Of course, you'll also recall that Mickey Schulz is the friend of Jared Mortimer. Jared Mortimer is the one who's alleged to have been involved in that nightclub incident in Sandton with Oscar Pistorius. And certainly, you know, Mickey Schulz basically saying he did not threaten Amy Pistorius. He was the one who was kicked. You know, so really drama, I don't think that is needed inside this court at this time. I think what most journalists, I think, were really focusing on today is what the state and the defense will say in those closing arguments. Of course, that's he said, she said. We don't really have the facts to support any of that at this stage. But the closing arguments, of course, today is what we're really expecting to take centre stage, and what the state and the defense will focus on in this last effort to convince Judge Thokozile Masipa whether Oscar Pistorius should stay out of jail or whether he actually should spend some time in jail.
Yeah, indeed. So that's pretty much so what's going to happen this morning. We're going to see the closing arguments of both, and we've heard that Judge Masipa is saying that she is booked up for the next couple of weeks, and this has to be closed today. A decision, do you think it's possible? I mean, what's the talk around the courtroom? Could it happen as early as next week? Could we see it this afternoon? Or possibly, do we have to wait until perhaps the end of November to even hear what's going to happen?
Well, Judge Thokozile Masipa really was trying to speed up both the defense and the state, clearly indicating that she's not available for the next few weeks, and basically that the state and the defense needed to wrap it today. Certainly that will happen, but it's unlikely that she would reach that decision today, Leanne. We're expecting some postponement for her perhaps to give that verdict in the next 3 weeks, or even next week. Well, she indicated she's not available next week. So, you know, it's very confusing about what the expectation is from Judge Thokozile Masipa, but certainly a verdict is not what we're expecting to happen today.
All right, Chriselda Lewis, thank you very much. We'll cross to you again a bit later on, no doubt, and in the news to find out the latest from what's happening at the North Gauteng High Court. That court proceeding gets underway at 9:30 this morning, and of course we will hear those closing arguments by both Nell and Roo, and I'm sure many people are going to be listening and watching that one very, very closely.